The last topic I'd like to cover in this lecture is the impact of Gestalt psychology on the broader field of psychology. At the beginning of the lecture, I mentioned that Gestalt psychology originally emerged in the 1910s and didn't become popular in Europe until the 1920s. So for about a decade, it was a prominent force in psychology. It was an important contributor to many of the I mentioned earlier in the lecture that Gestalt psychology emerged in the early 1900s and became popular in both Germany and the United States in the 1920s. But it didn't last long. It would eventually fall out of favor. It did, however, contribute to many of our modern psychological principles. In fact, cognitive psychology is a cousin of Gestalt psychology. If Gestalt psychology did have an impact on psychology, why do so few of us know about it? What happened? There were several things that were happening in the 1920s and the 1930s that made it difficult for Gestalt psychology to compete and survive with the other perspectives. First and foremost, behaviorism was gaining popularity in the 1920s and the 1930s. We will learn about behaviorism next week in week 10 and in week 11. Number two, Gestalt psychology was too theoretical for many American psychologists. They were focused on more practical theories, more practical applications of psychology, and the Gestalt psychologists really didn't do a very good job of selling their perspective. They studied it well, but they didn't promote it very well. Number three, many people incorrectly assumed that Gestalt psychology was focused solely on perception, when in fact they studied all kinds of things: problem solving, decision making, memory, learning. They did focus on a variety of topics, but there was this stereotype, this assumption that Gestalt psychology focused only on perception. And finally, many of the founders taught at small colleges where there was a lack of resources for research and a lack of graduate students to help carry out that research. One of the reasons why the three founders ended up at smaller schools is because they were German and they immigrated during the years leading up to World War II. That is all for our week 9 lecture. I hope you found this information to be interesting. Although we don't talk about Gestalt psychology anymore, now you have a little bit more background information and you probably know a little bit more than most people who study psychology. Next week, we'll begin to learn about behaviorism, and we'll continue with this topic into week 11. Module 4 is actually devoted to behaviorism. Individuals like Ivan Pavlov, John B. Watson, and B.F. Skinner.